Greetings to all. Today let us learn about one of the spiritual lessons which can encourage us to stand strong in tough times. Today our topic is: why does God allow the sufferings in our lives? Suffering is a universal human experience that can leave us feeling confused, angry, and hopeless. We may wonder why God allows us to endure pain and hardship, especially if He is all-powerful and all-loving. The book of Exodus provides us with some insights into this question, as we see the Israelites endure great suffering and hardship in their journey from slavery in Egypt to freedom in the Promised Land. Suffering is a difficult and painful experience that we all face at some point in our lives. We may suffer from physical illness or injury, emotional pain and trauma, financial loss, or the death of a loved one. When we experience suffering, we may wonder why God allows it to happen. If God is all-powerful and all-loving, why does He allow us to endure such pain and hardship? The book of Exodus provides us with some insights into this question. In Exodus, we see the Israelites endure great suffering and hardship in their journey from slavery in Egypt to freedom in the Promised Land. Through their experience, we can learn several lessons about why God allows suffering in our lives. Lesson 1: Suffering can be a consequence of sin. The Israelites' suffering in Egypt was a consequence of the sin of their ancestors, who had sold Joseph into slavery in Egypt, Genesis 37-50. As a result, the Israelites were enslaved and oppressed by the Egyptians for over 400 years. Similarly, our own suffering may be a consequence of our own sin or the sin of others. We live in a fallen world where sin and its consequences are a reality. However, it is important to note that not all suffering is a direct consequence of sin. In John 9:1-3, Jesus' disciples asked Him whether a man's blindness was caused by his own sin or the sin of his parents. Jesus replied, "Neither this man nor his parents sinned, but this happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him." This shows us that sometimes God allows suffering to occur for reasons that we may not fully understand, but that ultimately serve a greater purpose. Lesson 2: Suffering can refine our faith. Through the Israelites' suffering, God refined their faith and dependence on Him. As they faced hardship and opposition, they learned to trust in God's faithfulness and provision. For example, when the Israelites were trapped between the Red Sea and the pursuing Egyptian army, they cried out to God for help. God miraculously parted the sea, allowing the Israelites to cross over to safety, Exodus 14. Similarly, our own suffering can refine our faith and draw us closer to God. It can teach us humility, dependence, and perseverance, and help us grow in our faith. Lesson 3: Suffering can demonstrate God's power. In Exodus, God demonstrated His power through the plagues that He sent on Egypt, which eventually led to Pharaoh's release of the Israelites. Similarly, God can use our suffering to demonstrate His power and bring about His purposes. He may use our suffering to draw others to Himself, or to bring about justice and healing in the world. For example, the Apostle Paul wrote into Corinthians 1:3-4, "Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves receive from God." Our own experiences of suffering can enable us to comfort others who are going through similar struggles. Lesson 4: Suffering can lead to liberation. The Israelites' suffering in Egypt ultimately led to their liberation and freedom in the Promised Land. Similarly, Our own suffering can lead to liberation and freedom from sin, shame, or other forms of bondage. As we trust in God and seek His deliverance, He can set us free and bring us into a place of blessing and abundance. For example, Jesus said in John 16:33, "In this world you will have trouble. But take heart. I have overcome the world." Through His death and resurrection, Jesus has overcome sin and death, and He offers us the ultimate liberation and freedom. Lesson 5: Suffering can reveal God's character. In Exodus, we see God's character revealed through His compassion, faithfulness, and mercy towards the Israelites. He heard their cries for help and delivered them from their oppressors. Similarly, our own suffering can reveal God's character to us and to others. As we cry out to Him in our pain and hardship, we can experience His love, comfort, and care. We can also testify to His goodness and faithfulness, even in the midst of our suffering. Lesson 6: Suffering can lead to transformation. Through the Israelites' journey in the wilderness, God transformed them from a nation of slaves to a nation of warriors and conquerors. Similarly, our own suffering can lead to transformation and growth in our lives. As we face adversity and overcome it with God's help, we can become stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. We can also develop a deeper understanding and empathy for others who are going through similar struggles. Lesson 7: Suffering can bring about eternal rewards. In 2 Corinthians 4:17-18, Paul wrote, "For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen, since what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal." Our own suffering may be temporary, but it can produce eternal rewards in heaven. As we persevere through our struggles and trust in God's goodness and faithfulness, we can look forward to the day when we will be with Him forever. In conclusion, the book of Exodus teaches us that suffering can serve a greater purpose in our lives, even when it feels painful and overwhelming. We can learn from the Israelites' experience and understand that suffering can be a consequence of sin, refine our faith, demonstrate God's power, lead to liberation, reveal God's character, lead to transformation, and bring about eternal rewards. Although we may not fully understand why we must endure suffering, we can trust that God is with us in the midst of it, and that He will use it for our good and His glory. May God bless you.